There's been discussion ever since Final Fantasy XVI launched around if it's even a Final Fantasy game. The online battle rages. People are using cuss words and pejoratives and all caps, so it's very serious. Final Fantasy as a concept, as an IP, and intellectual property, has a valuation to its owner, Square Enix, and it's a big number, one can presume. They want to protect that value, increase it if possible, and they are clearly struggling with the idea that the audience for a traditional turn-based adventure game is there. I'm not saying it is or isn't, but rather it made me wonder about how fans relate to franchises and the sense of ownership that develops around ongoing IP, not just in video games, but also around films, shows, books, Taylor Swift. How do nostalgic fans and franchises seeking growth live in peace and harmony? Is it possible? Who the f am I to talk about this? Great question. Well, I am not a Final Fantasy fan. I don't dislike it, but I don't have the street cred that comes from past engagement with the franchise. I've only ever played 7 and 10, and I didn't finish either. Blame Blockbuster's rental policies or the fact that I often fall victim to my ever-shortening attention. The point is, as someone who doesn't have skin in the game but still ended up lurking around the surrounding online discourse because I googled how to get a chocobo in 16, I'm not concerned about whether this is or isn't a Final Fantasy game, but about the relationship we have with IP, how it holds on to us. Final Fantasy has value for Square Enix, but it has value for the fans too. Before we go any further, let me tell you about this video's sponsor. Your mom. Your mom. Let's see what your mom says. She wants to know if you're drinking enough water. Now, as for Square and the other publishers, the corporations that own the IP we're talking about, they're in an odd position. It's a relatively recent phenomenon in the human experience that international megacorporations own and control libraries of fiction worth billions, maybe trillions. Final Fantasy, Call of Duty, Star Wars, yada yada yada, times infinity plus one. And that's weird, because as valuable as franchises are, it's an incredibly unstable value. It's not gold or wheat or delicious cheeseburgers. It's ideas made up of worlds full of made-up characters with made-up problems. Those ideas are only worth billions of dollars so long as we, the fans, love them. The monetary value of fiction is in its hold on our hearts, and that's not something you just twist a dial on. You can't just place an order for more emotional connection. And as for the fandom of any given franchise, when talking about them, we have to remember a fan base is rarely, if ever, a monolith. The opinions are legion. People connect with video games and movies and books and music for all sorts of different reasons and thus value different aspects of the same thing. If you loved Final Fantasy for epic stories and dudes with big swords, 16 is likely right up your alley. If instead you placed a premium on the party-based, turn-based combat and the exploration of previous entries, you might feel like somebody else pooped your pants. Could you imagine? So if publishers need to nurture and grow the make-believe that makes real money, and fans want all sorts of different things, new entries can be divisive. Obviously! When Final Fantasy XVI producer Naoki Yoshida gave an interview to GameInformer, he talked about wanting to bring in a new generation of gamers. Well, I'm not that. I was already old when the N64 was born. 8 years old, damn near a man grown. But I am new in a sense. Yoshida says Creative Business Unit 3 is full of developers that love turn-based games and grew up on them even within Final Fantasy history. But when it came to designing Final Fantasy XVI, the team asked itself which games are popular today amongst younger generations of players and which games the team was enjoying these days. It turned out that a lot of the team's answers were action games. I like action games. Gosh darn, that is like a weight off my chest. I like action games. I like action games. Fast, twitchy, action, baby. Now, I do dabble in turn-based games. I'm not some action game simp. I like action games. I spent some time this year getting sucked into Octopath Traveler 2, a wonderful game also from Square Enix, and I swear I'm going to finish it after I get back to Tears of the Kingdom, and then it'll probably be time for Starfield and Alan Wake 2. Hey, this is not a video shaming me about how I play games. That's an idea. So in this instance, even though I'm not the younger generation, I'm part of the, let's say, modern audience that they wanted to appeal to. And it seems they succeeded in that goal by most metrics. Fantastic scores on Metacritic and OpenCritic, and more importantly, 3 million copies shipped and sold during its launch week, all while restricted to the PS5 installed base. And most importantly, I like it. So far, I'm deep into Act 2, and no spoilers, but I found the story engaging and the combat to be awesome. The boss fights are plentiful and just plain fun. The cinematics are top-notch. The combat loop, coming from Capcom veteran Ryota Suzuki, is so well designed, and the music is flat-out incredible. The product is good, but is it a Final Fantasy? Yes, it is. It says so right on the box. Plain as day, clear as crystal. However, is it though? You see, as I mentioned earlier, longtime fans have connections and expectations, and not all of them were met. Are those expectations even valid? Well, yes, I certainly think they are. Not least because I have those feelings about IP that I love and have history with. For example, one of the video game series I hold dear, Gears of War. I would be pissed if they took it from a third-person, cover-based shooter and made it a first-person dating sim. I would still play and romance the hell out of the Cantus, but I would be upset, especially if the Cantus didn't reciprocate those feelings. Why won't you love me, Cantus? But it's not just that fans have an emotional attachment to previous entries in a franchise that makes their feelings valid. They also have power. Kaylee and Alexander McBride, I think I butchered that name, a researcher at the University of Glasgow, had this to say on the power of fans. The internecine debates that used to take place between fans and creators are fully visible to the public at large now, and can negatively influence the success and social perception of the property. And he further states, this naturally adds a further layer of complication to the matter of writing and running franchise fictions, and it will undoubtedly be incumbent upon future creators to develop strategies to cope with this ongoing challenge. It seems increasingly likely as creative technologies evolve that these tensions are only going to increase, and that these strategies will require the utilization of a shared creative space where practitioners and fans can negotiate mutually beneficial and productive participatory relationships. Now, he said all this in 2007 in relation to television, but it still to this day sounds like a nightmare recipe for a world full of technically polished but vapid productions in pursuit of fan service that is too afraid to take risks in subject, theme, or execution. But when has sounding like a nightmare ever stopped history from marching forward? So the truth remains that commercial artists have to take into account the reception they will receive from consumers, i.e. fans. Not only that, but when you think about the ballooning budgets of AAA games, the artists won't even be handed the keys if the corporations who own these franchises don't believe they will deliver art that goes cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. 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 And therein lies another challenge. Corporations, which exist to make money, usually view the making of money as the only worthwhile endeavor because games, movies, etc. have become so expensive that they need mass adoption to succeed and be profitable. And the last few decades have proven that one damn near fail-safe way to ensure an insanely expensive production makes profit is by stapling it to the back of an existing IP. Thirdly, we circle back to the creators, the artists, the game developers in the case of Final Fantasy XVI or other video games. Taking another look at that GameInformer interview, Yoshida says, "This is a chance for us to challenge ourselves, to try to do something that the series had never done, but that we want to really try to do, and that's moving to the full action-based system. There was always the option to maybe try a hybrid type of system where we have action and turn-based elements, but again, rather than trying that and having something that's not complete and not satisfying, we decided to focus fully on just bringing the action." Now, you can disagree with what they wanted to do till the cows come home, but sooner or later, you'll have to face the fact that there are cows in your home and that Yoshi P and Creative Business Unit 3, like all artists, are going to be at their best when they are making something they are truly passionate about. Consider this. With the rise of franchise properties, in many ways we have seen the fall of the artist. IP outlives, outgrows, abandons its creators. Gandalf, Dumbledore, and Obi-Wan have all moved out of their author's house, and they can do whatever they want now. Ice cream for dinner, it's pure chaos. Final Fantasy was created by Hironobu Sakaguchi, He hasn't been involved with the series since 2003. His most recent title was exclusive to Apple Arcade. Should we really expect modern artists to stay within the boundaries drawn by the previous creators? As safe as that world would be, I believe it would grow bland quicker than hitting like and subscribe so you don't miss any fresh content from the channel. I would be grateful for your support. So as you can see, I'm sort of theorizing that we have this conflict of divergent forces. Fans want new titles to exist in complement with existing entries in a franchise, and that means different things to different fans. Artists want to create something fresh in most cases, since create sort of lends itself to the idea of newness, and they want to tackle something that stretches them artistically. And finally, the companies who decide what gets made, well, they want those sweet dollary dues. So who has the right of it? I think it's too soon to tell in the case of Final Fantasy and franchises in general. It's sort of this weird alternate rock, paper, scissors. Fans have the money that corporations want, corporations have the IP that fans want, artists are the only people who can distill the IP into a consumable product. So when an artist wants to try something new that's gonna cost a pretty penny and corporations want to mitigate risk, they sometimes glue new ideas onto old properties, and amongst the fans, there may be much wailing and gnashing of teeth. And since fans have all the money, I guess we'll just see. Okay, so I want to avoid talking about change as good or bad, like it exists on a moral scale, but rather just to state sometimes change works. Assassin's Creed has changed wildly since Origin took it into the open world. And while many fans consider it a departure too far and are celebrating the alleged old school revival with the upcoming AC Mirage, it's important to remember that Valhalla is the second largest profit generator in Ubisoft's history. The change worked. And 2018's God of War was a huge success, even though it changed a lot about the earlier entries. From freeing the camera, eliminating combo strings, adding echoes of RPG progression into the weapon and gear system, this was a departure that fans felt still honored the original's core identity. So, is Final Fantasy XVI different? Even though you're probably shouting an answer at me, I think it's a question that will take time to really answer. The true reception of a game and how its effect reverberates onto future titles can't be understood in its first month of release. If this game makes a bunch of money and grows the fan base, Square Enix is not going to look back, because the change will have worked, even if it disappoints longtime fans. But it could go very poorly. Sometimes change doesn't work, like when Shadow Warrior 2 added color-coded modifiers that corresponded to enemy types. That was awful. But the change always comes, in the search for a bigger audience, a bigger payoff, and the search for creative freedom. Change comes to every franchise. I think what I'm trying to say is that franchise properties and the fandoms who love them are very young in relation to, I don't know, the Earth. What I just mean to say is massive fiction fandoms really started picking up steam in the 80s and have evolved further in the 21st century. More and more narrative art is becoming centered around IP first and foremost. People used to go see movies because they starred Cary Grant or Meryl Streep or Air Bud. Now we're on like Transformers 19 starring Optimus Prime, who isn't fucking real and so doesn't have an impact on the execution of the art the way a human creator does. As the actor Anthony Mackie once said, the evolution of the superhero has meant the death of the superstar. The concept is bigger than the artist now. Final Fantasy isn't real, but the people who work at Creative Business Unit 3 are. And they need a new name. But I think also the license to challenge themselves. IP is king right now, but is that the forever way of things? How sustainable can it be to try to continually make old things new, recycling stories and characters like a comic book universe refresh? How sustainable can it be to try to grow fan bases ever larger without alienating early adopters? When an entertainment company's strength is in the IP itself and not the creators, fictional worlds and characters and game mechanics are never allowed to fade away or be finished, even if they seem to reach an organic or logical conclusion. They instead must be ever-changing, always growing, moving on to the next untapped demographic of potential consumers, I mean fans, that they can treat like cash-filled piñatas. So maybe we shouldn't try to hold on to them. As Bob Rehak once wrote, "Such is the nature of the successful media franchise doomed to plow forward under the ever-increasing inertia of its own fecund replication." Maybe we have to be more willing to move on, stop seeking the familiar in franchises that are going to change. Embrace the change. Move on to new ideas, new worlds. Let's put creators back in the driver's seat. Because franchises don't make decisions, but their owners, executive boards of 21st century Vikings who want nothing more than to pillage our wallets, very much do. And look, I like this game, but I think I would like it by any other name.